I'm going to hand over now to Becki Morris. I just realized I hadn't pressed record. That's why I paused there for a moment. I'm handing over to our chair today, Becki Morris. She's the director of Disability Cooperative Network, a UK-based group of committed museum professionals who work to promote and embed inclusive practice in the heritage and cultural sector. And I know that she's very passionate about storytelling as well, which makes her so ideal. And it's brilliant to have people from the region and from the States joining us today. I'll hand over to you now, Becki. Thank you so much, all of you.
Hello, and thank you, Michelle, and welcome everybody to this fantastic opportunity to have a talk about vision portraits. We're joined today by a fantastic panel, which is by Kayla Hamliton, who is an artist, producer, and educator who is originally from Texarkana, Texas, and now based at the Bronx in New York. Kayla self-produced projects and is a member of the 2017 Bessie Award-winning cast of Skeleton Architecture, The Future of Our Worlds, curated by Eva Ya Asantawia. I apologize if I've got that wrong. In addition to Skeleton Architecture, Kayla dances with Sydney L. Mosley Dances and Giselle Mason Performance Project. She teaches masterclasses around the United States and is the recipient of Angela's Pulses Dances While Black 2017 Fellowship. Under the name of Kay Hamliton Projects, Kayla has self-produced numerous projects and organizes community events and writes arts integrated curriculum throughout New York City. When Kayla is not dancing, she's a special educational teacher at Highbridge Green School who loves to watch Law and Order on Hulu while sipping on peppermint tea. You and I are of the same mind. I love peppermint tea, but I've never seen an episode of Law and Order. So I need to sort that. We're also joined by Professor Robert McRuer, who is an American theorist who has contributed to fields in transnational queer and disability studies. McRuer is also known as being one of the founding scholars involved in forming the field of queer disability studies, particularly for a theoretical outlook known as Crip Theory. He is currently Professor of English at the George Washington University at Washington, DC. Welcome, Robert and Kayla. And then we're further joined by Thom Davies. Thom is a Warwickshire-based independent filmmaker who is dyslexic. I'm dyslexic. He studied filmmaking and screenwriting at Worcester University, where he made a short documentary about being dyslexic, interviewing friends and family with the occasional rant mixed with comedy and animation. When he uploaded his film, it received 65,000 hits and positive comments. In addition to his other film work and inspired by the film feedback, I Am Dyslexic was developed into a feature-length documentary via crowdfunding. Thom works with neurodiverse adults to create a funny, irreverent documentary on dyslexia with positive personal stories. There was rules though, in regards to I Am Dyslexic, which was no pondering in parks, no sad piano music, and definitely no crying. During the process, Thom has learned a lot, that you can't make film alone, and also that other dyslexics had a much more tougher time than he did. If you don't, so do find I Am Dyslexic on YouTube. I will send over the link in relation to that so you do get a chance to see it, because it's a fantastic, incredibly empowering, but extremely funny film as well. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on particularly a Saturday, and in also in regards to talking about vision portraits. First thing I wanted to talk about was in regards to your responses to the film. What did you think to Rodney Evans' work? Who wants to start? They've all gone quiet.
I'm happy to start, and maybe it will spark other people's thoughts. I thought it was a really wonderful, engaging documentary. I loved the way that the four profiles each were working in a different genre. So we had dance, film, photography, and creative writing that also became sort of spoken word performance. And each of the artists were actively reinventing that genre. I'm happy to talk more about that. We might talk about it over the course of the whole hour. But it's not just that Kayla was dancing, whatever that might be, but she was sort of transforming what it means to perceive dance and how viewers of dance receive it, and so forth. I also love the way that the film actually makes it absolutely clear that there are so many different ways to be blind. Sometimes in the US, blind culture can be a bit macho. There's like literally blind boot camps where you like go and learn how to be blind, and they can be quite useful, but they have a certain masculinist bent to them. So the fact that the film opens with those loving, tender photos from John Dugdale, that's the name, right? And he has those images of him and Octavio that are in this sort of intimate space where they are indeed learning to be blind, but it's through a sort of tender homoeroticism. And then, you know, there's many other elements of diversity that the film portrays. So it's not just there's more than one way to be blind, there's more than one way to be Black, there's more than one way to desire. All of these things are at play in the film, and I think it's quite beautiful.
I think one of the things I loved about your particular part of the film, Kayla, was when you were talking about the sensation and the feeling of dancing, and that people can engage on so many different levels than they may not have experienced before. What was when you were in the film, sort of what were you thinking of in respect to your messages to the audience?
Sure. So this is Kayla speaking. For anyone who sees the world like me, I'm a Black woman. I'm wearing a Black shirt. I have on a Black head wrap, wide framed glasses, and behind me, I'm in my living room, and behind me is a off-white curtain. So again, this is Kayla speaking, and when it turns to feeling, can you ask the question again? I think I lost it.
Yeah, don't you worry at all. So you were talking about the sensation and the feeling when you dance, and that really we engage on different levels as people. When you participated in the film, was that kind of, that was such an important message, I felt. In terms of that, what did you want the audience to think and feel from your particular part of the film?
Sure. I'm only speaking from the I in my experience.
Yeah.
That because dance is the primary source of information is through sight. There is a level of critique, right? Sight is how we learn. It's about putting yourself in a shape that's identical to a teacher, which is not tactile or sensory other than the vision. So I say that to say that I've become, as my eyesight starts to diminish, I'm becoming more interested in what is it that I'm feeling or sensing to portray to a participant of the work, and how can I get the viewer, no pun intended, the viewer to feel what it is that I'm feeling simultaneously, to deconstruct the notion of what is good dance and what is bad dance, what are you receiving from the art that you are experiencing. Now, I'm not for sure if that made any sense, but it definitely makes sense to me. But yes.
I think it's great, because you're absolutely right in that there is that form of expression and being able to relate directly to the audience, that it's not good or bad. And you're talking about your peripheral vision as well, in terms of, and also that element of trust. If the lights are dark, if the lights are off, in respect to the theatre, that you have to have somebody to sort of guide you to the stage. So that kind of relationship, and then that expression that comes out, which is almost independent. I do have a habit, folks, that sometimes I do tend to get into my own zone and sort of talk about all of this. But in terms of your own experiences, Thom, as a filmmaker, in terms of your key messages, what did you want the audience to think and feel with I Am Dyslexic?
Both films were very similar in some ways and very different in other ways. Mine one was mainly based for a younger audience, but this one also kids could watch. But my one was a bit more child targeted at young dyslexic kids. And this film was beautifully made, and it was just, they're different styles of filmmaking. But I basically, my film was to it was mainly based to be a kind of get kids to be proud to be dyslexic and be I've totally forgotten how to speak. It's all about trying to get them to be proud of who they are and not be scared of being dyslexic. Like in the film we watched, there's a lot of it was like almost coming out, because a lot of the people were talking about pretending to be able to see, and then during the film, during their stories, they slowly all decided, I'm blind. That's who I am now. It's not going to define me. Just like in my film, I had that trying to stop being defined by the dyslexia, and this is also being that their talent and they can do whatever they want. And that's really what I was trying to, and make kids laugh about being a joke about it, because one of the worst things what dyslexia did to me was destroy my confidence, and that's what it was all about. It's just confidence building, just like this film was. I think young kids should be able to see this film if they've become blind. It would be great for confidence building, because all these people went on to make something fantastic.
I completely agree. I think
if that made sense, did that make sense?
It does make complete sense.
It made sense to me. Some of it did, but that's all you need to do. If it makes sense to you, it's fine.
It's fantastic. Robert, you've spoken about this in your own research in respect to the concept of identity, but also in who's telling the story. I think that was one of the things that I really like about the empowering narrative of disabled and neurodivergent people, is that it's them that's actually speaking and not speaking. People are not speaking for us, or using narratives that can actually put us into a categorization. So despite of, overcame, or a case of, you wouldn't think that they're, like that, those sort of languages that can make you feel really sort of compartmentalized, but also in terms of what those social constructs can be, and how actually those narratives themselves can become quite anxiety enabled because of what those stories are attempting to tell. They're not letting the right people tell the stories. I know that you've done that as a clear part of your research. Would you like to talk a little bit about it?
Sure, there's lots of things that are sort of animating your comments. This is Robert McRuer again. A lot of things animating your comments, but I think most importantly, just the global disability watch phrase of nothing about us without us. It's really important to sort of think about how we live in a culture of normalization. The philosopher Michel Foucault has talked about how for 2 centuries, it's all been about separating the normal from the abnormal, and that has been really detrimental to specifically to disabled people and to queer people, because if you're separating the normal from the abnormal, able-bodied becomes normal, and heterosexual becomes normal. And so the disability movement's claim of nothing about us without us is really an attempt to reverse that objectification. And I think it's beautiful in the documentary because you see the ways in which people are literally subjected in the film to a diagnostic gaze. And sometimes that's quite helpful, but it also objectifies us when we are being examined and poked and prodded and told to look down and to the left and to the right. And so the film counters that so wonderfully with that sort of speaking back in our own voices, not just being spoken about, poked, prodded, diagnosed, objectified, but subjectively narrating new experiences. And I would add that sometimes can be so transformative of culture in general. So a great example that I love to use is the movement in Los Indignados in Spain in 2011. They were occupying squares to protest austerity, and they were explicitly inspired by the disabled movement. So nada sobre nosotros sin nosotros, nothing about us without us, became no nos representan. They don't represent us. So like the disability movement ended up giving the vocabulary to this larger movement against austerity and cuts and so forth. So I think that watchword can become really transformative for many different movements. And the film represents that too.
I love that they don't represent us, because it's such an empowering words to use. It's Becki Morris here. And one thing I haven't done, and I do apologize, is I have not audio described myself. I'm a white woman with dark brown hair, which is short. I'm in my mid to late 40s. Where's it gone? And also I wear squarish glasses, and I'm wearing a black jumper, and I'm actually based in Warwickshire. I think the key thing is it's that when it's about you don't represent us, I think one of the key elements in the film as well was the whole sort of concept with John Dugdale, when he just says to his agent, you know, of everything that's going on in his life, and his agent responds as, oh gosh, like that. And then he felt almost free in saying that. I felt that was so interesting, because that in itself carries so much weight in terms of describing what is going on, but also how you expect others to respond. Because we know, Thom and myself as Becki, that can actually be a real double-edged sword, like a lot of people. And particularly then Rodney's experience of the public access routes within New York City. And there's one bit where he gets stuck between the train and the platform. Oh my God. And then that sort of social expectation by the passengers on the train. One of the reasons that was caused was because he was, people were telling him to rush off the train. I feel that gives so much expectation, so much sort of awareness of what is not acceptable. But we all know, Kayla, I'm sure you may have had that situation of the lack of awareness in terms of design, but also in terms of experience. Would you be happy to share with any experiences that you have in relation to that? If you don't want to, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I don't wish to answer that question.
Of course, it's not a problem at all. I think one of the things that I've found recently is when it comes to, so I'm an access auditor, one of the things that I look particularly into at the moment is how we can create systems how does cinema help us, and how does filmmaking help us in regards to raising awareness about what is out there, but also in terms of those particular barriers. What do you think, Robert?
Are you asking sort of about the pedagogical role of the film, or something a little different? Or maybe just say the question one more time and I'll
Sure. I do have a habit of sort of providing context to the question. So with regards to that, what I found particularly provocative for me was Rodney's experiences of the access routes, getting off the trains in New York City, and how he was able to try and negotiate that space and some of the negativity in relation to that. But what I find is sometimes with filmmaking, when the narrative's personal, that it can raise awareness in relation to those difficulties.
I think that's really important in disability culture, narrating access adventures, shall we say, because it sort of provides for all of us, disabled or non-disabled, that sense of a sort of lived phenomenology. What does it mean to move through the world with this particular body? How is the world designed or not designed for my body or my mind? And so I really do think narrating access adventures is really important. And that's one of the contributions of this film. I love the way the film is doing multiple things, sometimes contradictory things. I think I mentioned this in email before the panel to the panelists. There's this moment where Rodney's talking about, oh, it's not sexy. He's talking a little bit about care work, and I could say more about that. And it's a complicated thing to think about whether care work is sexy or not. But I found the film so sexy in terms of the ways in which all of the four performers were presenting themselves. And the camera actually at that moment when he's talking about it's not sexy is kind of scanning his body and these like hip boots that he's wearing. And it's like, how is this not sexy? So that's another really lovely element of the film. You know, the film gives you diagnosis, it gives you at times a quest for a cure at the end, or at least a remediation, but it's giving you access stories, humor, sexiness, sensuality, and all of those in this mix are really making for a fine piece of art.
It's so true. It's so true. For me, it's that whole concept of the personal narratives that is so powerful. But for me, it's that kind of that element of that day-to-day experience, which is critical in respect to our understanding and in terms of representation. Thom, like Kayla, you've created your own productions through crowdfunding. What challenges did you have? And also, were there any unforeseen opportunities from this work?
Just trying to get the word out there was most difficult thing. Was trying to find people who would be interested in helping and being part of the project was very hard, because dyslexics are not good at talking to cameras, and they get very awkward around stuff. I'm not great at talking to cameras. That's why I like being behind the camera than in front. So trying to find people to be kind of interested in the film was very difficult at first. And with your help and some other great people who really were up for helping make the film, so that was the biggest challenge. And when we got the Kickstarter finance was absolutely amazing. And we got a lot of support through that. And when you finally say, oh, I got a Kickstarter, got it through Kickstarter, people get more interested, because it's very difficult trying to get it done and financed. It was, and what was the last question? Sorry, completely last bit of you.
Don't you ever worry. So it was like, did you have any unforeseen opportunities from crowdfunding?
No, it was just from when you. It's mainly people are more interested in the film when you actually finance it. That was probably the opportunity from getting a Kickstarter project completed, was people are, because it is very difficult trying. It's just, I spent nearly every day hours trying to just posting it again and again all over the internet, trying to get people to actually take notice. And if you haven't got somebody famous connected to it, they don't care. You need, the best way of getting this stuff done is get some random celebrity to endorse it, but no random celebrities would want anything to do with me.
But but you also worked within the communities based in Tamworth, Staffordshire, Warwickshire as well, in terms of those local connections.
One of the biggest helps were mums. Mothers of dyslexic children. They were the ones getting the word out. They were the fighters. They're the ones who know their kids are got something special about them. So they're the ones who push dyslexia really hard. They are the one. A lot of Facebook pages and stuff who helped me finance the film.
Fantastic. One of the things that was particularly attractive in terms of Thom's film was that there was a trailer at the beginning where it said there should be no pondering in parks, there should be no sad piano music, and there should be no crying. And immediately that honed in of what those key messages of that project, and also in terms of the outcomes of the film. Kayla, with your own work in terms of self-producing through project work, would you mind talking a little bit more about that? Because I think one of the things that I loved about your work was that you were creating, like me, your own platform in respect of where you wanted to go and what you wanted to do. Did you have similar situations similar to Thom's?
Sure. I do want to, if I can like circle back to something earlier that was said about the contradictions and I guess the no crying. What I found really when watching the film for the first time, I will say that when Rodney first, I did not know Rodney before the film. I was introduced to Rodney, and coming from dance, we do things with very little fun support. Like as a dancer, you're like the grant writer, you're the producer, you do your music, you do your, okay, we do all the things as dancers. So I thought Rodney's work was just going to go on YouTube. You know, it was just going to be like his own, personal project. So I did not realize the scope of the film and how many folks were going to view it. And I say that to say, at that particular juncture at the film, I was my awareness or my understanding of what a disability was or what it is and its relationship to my identity, and how for all my life I was, because of ableism and racism and capitalism, ignored that aspect of my identity. So I say that to say, like a lot has shifted for me as an artist since the film, because I was at a very particular place in my life during the film. And I actually feel like the film helped me process and journey towards a different understanding of who I am in my relationship to the world. And I have to be, when I watch the film, there are, to speak more to the contradictions, there are times where I cringe at my own story because it's like, damn, I was there. I was at that place, but also acknowledging and accepting that that's where I was, and that at each part of my journey and my understanding it's going to change, right? And that like I could just be like a walking contradiction, like learning the next lesson. That I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah, so that's in thought. And then to answer your question, yes, I have an abundance of love and support around me. Before I identified as a disabled person, and it hasn't grown and it hasn't changed with me identifying as a disabled person. So I wish I can tell you a very sexy story about how I struggled to fundraise, but my community is small, but my community is very loving, and they give what they can. And when everybody gave what they can, I was able to meet my fundraising goal. In terms of unexpected opportunities, a gift and a curse. Everyone's asking what's next, as if the fundraising was easy. It was, I mean, they're loving folks, but it was still, you know, it still took a minute and a lot of effort and time and just energy. Yeah, so everyone's asking what's next, but I don't wish to do that again. I wish yes, I don't wish to do that again, because as Thom mentioned, it was a lot.
Oh, bless you, I can relate to that. Robert,
I wanted to gloss that, if I may, just say a
of
little bit.
course.
I really like what, this is Robert McRuer again, and I haven't actually described myself. You're getting descriptions along the way of the four of us. I'm a white guy in my 50s, salt and pepper hair, gray shirt in a dark beach house room in Delaware. That importance of community is so vital, I think, and Kayla is fortunate, I think, to be in the center of a New York disability dance world. There's so much going on there. I think it's unrivaled. There's other places in the world. I think of Mexico City, actually, which has this Teatro Ciego, Theater of the Blind, that's also very vibrant. But once you have that community, so much is possible. And it's not just blind dance or visually impaired dance that is so vibrant in New York, but you know, Alice Shepard has been based there. Simi Linton has made a film. Christopher Nunez. There's just all these great people in New York, and that community both means so much, but also, to link Thom and Kayla's comments, it also provides the space where people can come out. I think that, you know, able-bodied culture thinks, why do you have to come out? You either are disabled or you're not. But it's like, no, it's so much more complicated than that, especially in an ableist world where, you know, often parents will be, oh, you're not disabled. I don't think of you as disabled. And you have to eventually say, like, I'm part of this culture and community.
I think one of the things that people do tend to forget about is that 80% of disabilities are hidden as well, and how you position that conversation in regards to coming out, as we say. Thom, were you?
Oh, sorry. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
go back to the community. Oh, sorry, Thom. Oh, sorry. Just to go really quickly to go back.
Yeah,
to the community.
go.
It wasn't until I met other Black disabled people that I saw myself within them and said it was okay, right? Being born and raised in the South, in the Midwest, the survival, right, was combating my Blackness and my full-bodied womanist, right? So like access was different, right? But I never saw myself in someone else. So it wasn't until I saw myself, I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's it. To speak to the community aspect, right? There's representation matters. And when you, anyway, in thought. Sorry, Thom. Hit it.
It's all right. I was just I just thought we're talking about disability, but I don't see dyslexia as a disability, because I'm not saying that people, because when you watch the film, you see a blind photographer, and they make beautiful photos. His photos were amazing. And then you meet some dyslexics who say, oh, I'm disabled, I can't read, I can't write, I can't do that. But there's a blind photographer. there's a blind filmmaker. They can do that. There's dyslexics out there. I've met a lot of them who, and I used to be one of them, who used to think, I can't read, I can't learn. And now I can't really see a dyslexia as a lot of people say, it's trying to make it a disability. Like there was some in England, there were some people trying to get dyslexics so they could get parking, disabled parking for a dyslexic person. And you're like, no, you don't need that. If you can't be part of the Paralympics, you don't see Paralympians who are dyslexic, who are just dyslexic. So the dyslexia is not a disability, it's a difficulty, and you can learn, you can do whatever you want. I don't see it as you can mark it down as a disability like a lot of people have been trying to push for, because there's people with worse difficulties out there who would not find dyslexia as a life altering. It changes your life, but it's not altering as bad as most actual disabilities out there. It's just because this film kind of showed me that the film we just watched was amazing, saying you can do whatever you want.
I think though sometimes it's about those societal barriers that create disabilities, and within education in particular, it's about enabling and realizing your talent and your strengths to be able to get to where you should be. I think for me sometimes it's those pathways along the way can become extremely challenging in respect to that process. And where I'm coming from, particularly in respect to DCN and my own work, is the whole element of trying to clear those pathways as much as possible collaboratively, and with people like all of you in respect to what we can do together. One of the things that I'm involved in is a group called We Shall Not Be Removed, which is about the recognition and the support of disabled artists and arts within the UK during, and particularly with the impacts that we've had of the sector during COVID and the lockdown. One of the things that we're doing is collaborating, but also raising the profile of each other's work in respect to what we're all up to. And also in terms of what the new post-lockdown world should look like, and how inclusive can we make it, and how can we be around the table when those decisions are made. So yes, I know that some people do also say I'm neurodivergent, but I'm not disabled. For me, it's always those disabling factors within society that are caused by societal systems that can be the difficulty. We do have some questions from the audience. Now, audience, would you like me to read them out, or would you prefer to say them yourselves? It's all gone quiet.
Is it okay if I come in and ask my question?
Of course you can. Yes.
I haven't written it out.
That's okay.
In the chat.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Helen Wheatley. I'm a white woman. I'm 45. I'm sitting in my living room in Coventry, and very pleased to be here. I have a question for Kayla, but it also a kind of comment about the film. So one of the things that the film made me think about was the process of collaborative working for in different ways for many of the disabled artists who represented in the film, and that those collaborations were more or less present in the different stories. And in the segment of the film that covered Kayla's work, you talked briefly, Kayla, about the choreographers that you worked with and the importance that you were working with Black women. But I note that those choreographers weren't named in the film, and I wanted to hear a bit more about who they were and about your process of working with them, if that's okay.
Sure. Hi, Helen. Nice to kind of meet you, and thank you, thank you for being here. Yeah, the work, I really wanted to illuminate Black female voices in concert dance, because here in the States, there's an absence of them in present and in our history books, in our dance history books. I shared with them, it was really an email. I knew some of them, I did not know some of them. I just sent an email, hey, I'm processing this. The work itself came about when my vision diminished the most. And then I asked myself, am I going to stop dancing, or am I going to keep doing this? And I had decided that I'm going to keep doing this. And I know that I can't, to Robert's point, I can't do this alone, right? I need to journey with people. And we can all be better, not better, maybe that's the wrong word, but we can all shift and change from one person's story. So I started with an email. Everyone said yes. I took the money that I received from the crowdfunding, went to each one of them. We shared stories. So it wasn't really about the dance, right? The dance happened, right? The dance, but it was about shared stories, shared vision, what each other are processing in the moment. I think questions, that's when I started asking, what is sight, or what is vision exactly? Is there a difference between sight and vision?
That's really
Yeah.
interesting. I think they're questions that kind of underlie the film and lots of parts of the film, but it's really illuminating to hear you kind of talk about that conversation, I guess, and that sense of sharing in your process.
Yeah, and then when it came to the dance, it was like, no, I don't want to do that. It became one of like, yes, no, maybe. Yes, I can do that. Maybe that's not, that move on the ground, not so much. So it was a time where I felt like I could say for the first time, that is not comfortable. That makes me feel X. So it was a process in which I was able to ask for what I needed, where I was learning to ask for what I needed. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you. I think there's another question in the chat from the other Helen in the room who wants it.
Fantastic. Oh, and Helen would like me to read this out. So, okay, does anyone have any thoughts about disabled aesthetics in film? In vision portraits, I think there are some instances of recreating the experience of being blind or visually impaired through the visuals used. I know Rodney also had an audio description track for the film specially made, as opposed to being made by an independently by a third party, as is usually the case with access materials made for feature films getting a release. Is there anything useful in building the idea that disabled filmmaking has its own identifiable aesthetics? It's a good question.
This is Robert again. I'm happy to kind of talk about that a little bit. I think indeed, disabled film might be understood as having identifiable aesthetics, varied aesthetics, of course. There's going to be maybe as many different aesthetics as there are disabled artists. But it is a question that theorists have taken up. There's a book by Tobin Siebers called Disability Aesthetics that gets at exactly those questions. And I think this film does it really well. It's not the only film I know of that tries to sort of play with sort of differing experiences of visuality. There's a film out of Spain, a disability film called Yes, We Fuck, that is about sexuality. And it's a really, really amazing film. And there's this one sort of sex workshop that experiments with darkness and light, and it's all about sort of discovering sexuality through touch. And it's represented in the ways in which the film kind of visually portrays the discussion. What I like about this film's play with it is that, you know, the experience of being blind is many, many different things. And sighted people don't realize that like blind people don't have the same vision. And the film gives you all sorts of different colors and shadows and tunnel vision at one point. And it's like the film, I think, successfully gives the variety of lived experiences of blindness.
I will
great.
say, oops,
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Kayla
Sorry,
speaking.
Kayla.
No, it's okay. This is Kayla speaking. I will say this is a question that I've been asking myself as an artist. I feel personally the eye patches to the audience was a misstep on my behalf to assimilate a disability. Although I don't know, to the disability community, it's offensive. However, that was not my intention. However, we know intention does not always match reality. I don't necessarily feel the audience felt that to me, but also the audience was full of my friends and family. Let's be real. Yeah, so I question, when is it a change in aesthetics, and when are we doing an assimilation of a disability? Yeah, in thought. Just these are just things that I'm gnawing at, because now my work, I would never put eye patches on the audience again. I'm thinking about how do I make a traditional dance, not a traditional dance, using disability aesthetic?
I think a good word maybe to throw in the mix might be gimmick. Like, when is it a disability aesthetic that is doing this sort of inventive stuff? When is it a gimmick, like those, you know, blind restaurants that exist around the world where, you know,
Gosh,
sighted
yes.
people go in and experience what it is to dine in darkness. I did wonder about that when I was watching your segment, Kayla. And I found myself thinking, well, you know, everybody in that audience has a different experience of visuality. So it's not necessarily just putting a sighted person's eye under a patch. It's actually putting all of the different people with all of the different experiences of sightedness in a new visual space. So I appreciate you saying how you as an artist reconsidered your choices.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, I think there's just different ways, like to push the field forward, that's outside of using like an eye patch, or like tools, if you will, or materials to shift perspectives in dance. Like, how does one play with descriptions? How does one play with how people are seated in the theater? How does one play with sound? How does one play with scent? I mean, although scent can get very not accessible for some folks, but like what are the other sensory elements can one play with that brings awareness, not necessarily changing the dance itself?
I agree. I love the whole element of being able to almost deconstruct the space, and also in terms of what those different elements could be, and that kind of idea of experimentation as well, in what does that mean in pushing working practice forward as well. So yeah, oh gosh, I could talk to you guys for hours. We do have a question with Michelle. Here she is.
Hi, thank you, Becki. I'm Michelle Aaron. I'm a 51-year-old white woman sitting in my living room with 3 dogs asleep, but who could bark at any moment. Especially if there's a delivery at the door, it happens a lot. This is a question for Robert, but of course, because of his work, but of course anyone can join in. I was really interested to hear what you might think about the film as queer, given Rodney's background and previous work, but also more than that in the film, not just in terms of questions of sexuality, but in terms of the intersectional nature of the film, but also in terms of aesthetics. But I'm sure you know what I'm asking. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, as I suggested about the ways in which the film gives us something outside of the sometimes macho culture of blind culture in the United States, I loved that aspect of the film. And the photographs are just so hauntingly beautiful from John Dugdale, and that opening with him kind of gives a queer backdrop to the entire film. So because he's really the first story, and you're getting this view of blindness as color, interestingly enough, because he's talking about all the colors he sees, you get that, and also blindness as arrow, or as arrows, and as queer arrows in particular. And I think that backdrop for the film ends up kind of providing a lovely setting for the rest of the stories that come, even though they're also heterosexual stories as well. But queerness ends up becoming this stretchy category in the film, not just about homosexuality, but about a different kind of sensuality and a different relationship to pleasure and the body.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And as well as, you know, the term coming out that you've used and is used so often, there's that element of passing that is talked about in the film, but also that resonates, of course, in terms of race and sexuality, etc. So yeah, really, really fascinating film for that reason as well. Thank you.
Excellent. How are we doing for time? We've got a few more minutes left. I think one thing that I loved about the film was Ryan's writing in respect to how he felt he could control his world in respect to his narratives and also in terms of his story, but also how he felt and how he dealt with his anger and his feelings. And one of the things that I loved about it was when his brother took him to the Rattlesnake Festival that I was talking to you guys just before the we went live, and the idea that the guide says, whatever you do, keep your eyes to the floor, and because they're everywhere, the snakes are everywhere, in which Ryan's brother goes up to him and says, "You're so screwed," like that. And also that he said, as a blind Canadian, he was being invited to the cook-off with the rattlesnake, but also in terms of, there was a particular experience I won't sort of go into the details of, but also about how he felt, how life was in respect to its fragility, but also what he could do in respect to going forward. And for me, it was always that essence of comedy and enabling that comedy. Thom, I know with your particular film, we were talking about at the end, no spoilers, but that kind of element of bringing sort of light humor to the situation as a form of almost provoking talking. And also, that's what I do, like that.
Yeah, I always, the way I deal with every problem in my life is with humor, and using humor as a coping mechanism, that word, and trying to use it as make everything. When I was young, it was quite bad because it was very used to deflect any kind of bad situation. When I was a kid, I used it and kind of bullied myself when kids heard me do something wrong, like I just did then with mispronouncing words. So I always used humor, but now I don't use it as a weapon against myself. I use it as a to entertain people and try and teach people that it's you can laugh at almost anything, and including watching the film. You can laugh at you can always make a joke about all conditions, like his brother saying, "Oh, you're screwed," or about the snakes. It's always I think humor can be used to deal with any kind of situation. But also, I forgot, I have to explain what I look like because everyone else has. I'm 35, white male. I'm wearing a Jurassic Park t-shirt. I'm wearing a terrible beanie hat because I haven't had a haircut in months. And I'm in a bare office because I'm moving. So I apologize because I only found out about this yesterday.
Yes, don't worry.
I would have been much better if I had more. I've prepared myself way more.
No, we really must thank Thom, because it's been absolutely brilliant having him join us at late notice, but also in terms of I felt that it was such an opportunity as well to sort of share what you're doing in respect to your filmmaking work as well. Oh my goodness.
Becki, can I say something about the sequence that you're flagging about Ryan, I guess is his name, the writer?
Of course.
I love that that's part of the film, gives us him as teacher as well as performer.
Yes.
I just think, you know, it's so important for us to have teachers who are not able-bodied or not white or not straight. And so you see him as an authority in the classroom and saying these really profound things about how narrative works for him. And you know, narrative's not about putting in, but taking out. And so actually obscuring certain things becomes part of his very art. Like, you have to say this in 1,000 words and then you're done. And then we see it put into practice in his own performance. I really liked the way in which it went from the classroom to the stage.
Yeah, I did. I loved how he said as well, those 1,000 words about it's got to be about your story and your own experiences. So we're just literally getting towards the end. We've not had any further questions at the moment. So with you guys, what are your do you have any last thoughts? And also what's happening next in relation to your own work?
This is Kayla speaking. This week, I just launched, I'm calling it D-BIPOC Unfragmented. I use a lot of descriptions in my choreographic process. So what I've basically started a virtual game of telephone, if you will, where I created a short movement snippet, described it, and I'm passing it to different Black and POC disabled artists, whatever genre, and they are going to use that description for their interpretation for their work. So if they're dancers, they'll use the description to make a new movement phrase, like use the description as a source of inspiration for their creation. They'll send it back to me and offer up 2 to 3 more disabled Black folk or POC, and then I'll resend the invitation. So it's going to be an online, I'm going to be posting them online using a hashtag so that other Black disabled folks can find each other and the world can find us. And then I'm going to house everyone's creations and websites, and to be on it's going to be on a website so that we can still find each other and folks can find us. It's just in search of community building during this time of COVID, and how we are here, but we're not always connected. So it's an attempt to connect us all. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. I would love to connect you with some people that I know in the UK as well, and also
that would be great. Yes, I'm hoping to extend the reach outside of the United States with this. Yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, let's keep in touch, because I'd love to share too what we're up to. That would be great.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Robert, how about yourself? Do you have any final thoughts? And also in terms of what are you up to in the next few months?
My final thoughts would first be that this has been great. It's been really enjoyable to chat with you all, and to the anonymous audience out there. It's lovely that you have joined us for this. My last book, that's now, I guess, 2 years old, was on disability activists and artists resisting austerity globally, though it was largely focused on the UK, of course, because of it being kind of a ground zero of austerity. But of late, I am really pivoting as much as I can south. So this concept of disability justice that grew up in sort of US and Canadian venues, disabled people of color, really sort of germinating what might intersectional disability justice look like. And I'm interested in what that means in Latin America in particular. So I'm very interested in pushing disability studies to not be so English centric. So I'm trying to make connections, increased connections in a range of Latin American places. I'm just starting this new work, so it's really, really new. But it will focus on a range of dancers, filmmakers, probably some museum exhibits, maybe photography in Latin American locations.
That's amazing, because that was one of the key elements of my work with DCN, is that we reached out beyond the UK as well, and that we connected across Europe with the US, and also in terms of what other people are doing in relation to audiences as well, particularly in regards to social policy and also economic policy in other countries. So yeah, that sounds really exciting. Absolutely fantastic. How about you, Thom? Apart from moving, good luck with that.
Yeah, especially now, they might shut us down. But basically, my final thoughts is this: I really enjoyed the film. I think for a film about being blind, it was incredibly visual film, and it showed you all the you mentioned before, it showed you all these different kinds of being blind, and it taught me quite a lot about all the different forms of being blind. It's just not just seeing black like you see in all the films. And I thought it was a really beautifully made film. But what I'm doing now is basically me and my friend have finally got ourselves together and organized our own production company called Thingamabob Films, because I can never think of a good word, so I always go thingamabob. And we'll hopefully want to make some films next year, but hopefully everything will calm down and we'll be able to do that. And during shutdown, I decided to try and write some children's books. So that's a bit easier to do when you're sat on your ass, not able to do anything. So I think that's one plan. So I just keep on coming up with other things because you have to keep your mind going.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's hopefully and still trying to get more people to come see the film I Am Dyslexic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the for me, it's always about that situation of having that platform to tell your own story, but also how you connect with other people in respect to those similar touch points within our own lives and our own experiences, in which we can all sort of start to collaborate and share those experiences, but also in terms of raising awareness and supporting each other. And what we've been doing at DCN since the lockdown we're now partnered with a consortium called Embed, which is a cross-sector consortium. And one of the things that we've been doing is supporting culture, arts and heritage in respect to the representation of disabled and neurodivergent people within the post-lockdown world. And that includes work in practice, the representation within the workforce, and also in terms of, as people reopen, we have our own recommendations and support in relation to those common barriers that we have within museums and theatres and various other places, and raising awareness of those barriers, but also providing actions and support to getting rid of them as well. And one of the other things that we've been doing is providing evidence-based work to government departments in regards to providing those new pathways. So it's been a very, very busy few months, but totally worthwhile, particularly in regards to the situation we're finding ourselves in what we can do collectively, but also in terms of sharing those personal narratives, such as with Rodney, and also with all of the participants in what we can do to create a better society and a better world. So on that note, thank you so much to my panel members. You've been absolutely fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today about Rodney Evans' film Vision Portraits. Really do appreciate it. And thank you, audience, for joining us today. It's been a wonderful opportunity to talk about such things. And also, I hope the conversation continues, and let's continue that conversation.
And thank you, Becki, for hosting and chairing and doing the job so very, very well. And thank you from the festival to the panel for taking part, for making the time and just being so wonderful. So good luck to you all. Thank you so much. And I'm going to end the recording and the meeting now. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.